dots.
Well, the thing that's inexplicable about this case and why people are so outraged, I do a fair amount of criminal defense work and have for 30 years. I can't think of a single case that I've ever had where there's a dead body and it's not a policeman who did the shooting where the person wasn't arrested. Having said that, you want them to do a good investigation. Nobody's saying you don't, but the problem is that they never do what they do here, which is not arrest somebody first. Usually you arrest first, you ask questions later, and that's always a complaint. And if, in fact, that is him in the white, with the white shirt, that's not a good fact. But some of the other stuff that's coming out, you can see now why the state's attorney's office is having some issues. They want to investigate this.
But the local police recommended arrest. That's my understanding.
Local police had the ability, and this is it, to just arrest. They didn't have to go to the state's attorney first. They could have arrested, taken the file over to the state's attorney and said, here, now it's in, it's your lookout. They didn't. And that's highly unusual.
And is that a function, Tanya, of this stand your ground law, or is this the subtle operation of racism, as people are thinking?
Well,
or maybe not so subtle.
I think that the local police would say that it's a function of the stand your ground law. The authors of the stand your ground law would disagree. But I do think, going back to Mark's point, I mean, what is just so outrageous to so many people about this case is that you have police officers showing up on a crime scene, assuming that the dead person is a criminal, and assuming that the shooter is telling the truth. I mean, where do we get making those assumptions?
You're shaking your head. Yes,
exactly,
that's the issue. They're
exactly
making assumptions based on stereotype and race.
Right, and that's why this case resonates, and that's why people are interested in it, and that's why people are following it.
And Tanya, you mentioned the originators of the Stand Your Ground law. If my controller would help me out here, I have some comments from Jeb Bush, who originated this particular law. And Daryl, I'm going to ask you to comment on this. Can you get that for me up there? Here we are. He's actually the one that signed the Stand Your Ground law into law in 2005. And he told reporters that the law doesn't apply in this incident. He himself, he said, I'm going to quote this, stand your ground means stand your ground. It doesn't mean chase after somebody who's turned their back, unquote. Daryl, how do you respond to Jeb Bush's comments?
I think clearly from the 911 tapes is clear that Trayvon was being followed. I mean, Mr. Zimmerman calls the 911 operator, reports that there's a suspicious person there, says he's following him. She instructs him not to follow him, and he does so anyway. Taking in addition to that, he also goes out and he follows Mr. Trayvon Martin. Now, he's demonstrating vigilante justice at its worst in America, and this is why so many people are outraged here.
And Tanya, what do we know about, I guess, domestic violence with Zimmerman and the issue that he was not tested for drugs, and yet in the court of public opinion now we have reefer madness raising its ugly head as it pertains to poor Trayvon. He had, God forbid, traces of cannabis, Mark. Hold on now. Traces in a plastic bag. That explains everything.
Which last I heard was not cause for being shot down in the street. But, what we do know about Mr. Zimmerman is that there were allegations of domestic violence against him. A former partner got a restraining order against him. He also got one in return. There were allegations that he was involved in a physical confrontation with a police officer.
And he needed some alcohol counseling.
And he needed some alcohol counseling. And so the great irony about all that is, look, it's not to crucify this guy in the media. It's to go... Zimmerman.
You're not interested in crucifying him.
I'm not interested in crucifying him, but what I am interested in is pointing out how wrong the police were in assuming...
I think Tanya's on to something here, because this has been my point. People, as we produce these segments, people are like, oh, what's next with Zimmerman? What do we find out of? I kind of feel like I don't care. I don't care.
It really doesn't matter. That's why I said yesterday, all the reports that were coming out where there's witnesses who say, well, I saw this or I saw that.
It doesn't matter.
That doesn't matter, because the issue, and it goes back to what we first started talking about, it's what resonates is everybody who has any experience with the police whatsoever, and unfortunately those in the minority community have a lot more experience with the police, knows that if the roles were reversed, the police would have arrested first.
Daryl,
it's incomprehensible.